Nobody tells you this, but your year doesn't start in January. It starts with the way you wake up. It sounds like an exaggeration, I know. But most people ruin 2026 before 7 a.m. Not for lack of effort, nor for lack of faith, but for a simple mistake, repeated every day, automatically. And the most curious thing? They think they're doing the best they can. That's why you should subscribe to the channel and like this video, because what you're going to learn today will change your financial life for the better. Perhaps you've experienced this before. You promise this year will be different. You set goals. You get excited. And a few weeks later, everything goes back to normal. Not because you're weak, but because nobody taught you how. Where change really begins. Spoiler alert. It's not about planning, it's not about money, and it's not about motivation. It's about something so basic that it's often ignored. Here's where the paradox comes in. The more you try to change your life during the day, the less result you get. And the more you adjust the beginning of the day, the less you need to force the rest. It's counterintuitive, but it works. And when you understand that, you realize that prosperity isn't luck, it's alignment. It's not a noisy miracle. It's a silent decision. In this video, you'll discover why waking up the wrong way can sabotage your entire year, and how a simple adjustment made every day completely changes how 2026 unfolds. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The first 30 minutes, where 2026 really begins. You might think it's an exaggeration, but the first 30 minutes after waking up, it's not just the beginning of the day. It's the control panel of your subconscious. It's during this brief period that your mind is most open, like Wi-Fi without a password. What goes in, stays. And that explains why so many people want it. Prosperity in 2026. But you wake up the same way, think the same way, and guess what? You reap the same results. The problem is that, without realizing it, you hand this precious moment over to the world on a silver platter. You open your phone, look at messages, news, bills, comparisons, and there it is. Yours. Morning ritual. It becomes an anxiety ritual. And then the mind goes into autopilot, as if saying, okay, 2026 will be the same as other years, just with a new calendar. It might sound like a joke, but it's serious. If you let the first seed of the day become chaos, you can't complain when the harvest comes in a mess. Now think about it. What if, instead of reacting, you started clearly? What if you took the wheel early in the morning and said, I'm driving today? It's not mysticism, it's strategy. Discipline small, at the right time, generates prosperity big picture up ahead. But there's a simple, almost silly detail that changes everything. And it starts even before you get out of bed. The silent mistake that steals your prosperity before 7 a.m. Now pay attention to this, because almost no one talks about it. The biggest saboteur of your prosperity in 2026 isn't a lack of money. It's a lack of direction early on. The moment you wake up is like a plane taking off. Small deviations there become big problems later on. And the most common mistake? Thinking that just taking a quick look at your phone doesn't make a difference. Spoiler alert, it does. A big one. When you wake up and immediately consume external information, your mind goes into reactive mode. You start responding to the world instead of create your day. It's like starting a match on the defensive, hoping not to concede a goal. And then discipline goes out the window, clarity disappears, and prosperity becomes just a beautiful but distant idea. It's no coincidence that successful people fiercely protect the first hours of the day. Here's a simple yet powerful twist. Before receiving anything from the world, you decide what you will give to it. You don't even need to get up yet. Just breathe, be present, and take control of your inner self. It seems like a small thing, but that's exactly where the game starts to change. And when you understand that, an inevitable question arises. Okay, but what exactly do I do right now to align my mind with what I want to experience in 2026? The invisible ritual that aligns your mind before the world speaks to you. Here's a point that almost nobody notices, but that Napoleon Hill hit hard. Before any external action, you need organize the internal state. It's not about jumping out of bed or making a to-do list. It's something simpler, and, precisely for that reason, often ignored. In the first few minutes after waking up, your mind is still malleable, like fresh clay. What you imprint there defines the shape of your entire day. The morning ritual begins with something basic, almost obvious, but extremely powerful. Conscious breathing, 3 deep, slow, unhurried breaths. Does it seem too simple to generate prosperity? Well, that's where the mistake lies. Discipline doesn't come from complicated things, it comes from consistency in simple things. When you control your breathing, you signal to your brain that you're in control, and that changes everything. And when breathing calms down, space opens up for something even more strategic, the intention. Before you even get out of bed, you choose how you want to act, decide, and react that day. It's not empty, positive thinking. It's direction. It's like adjusting your GPS before you start driving. And from that point on, it becomes impossible not to touch on a crucial detail that separates those who only start well from those who truly transform the entire year. The internal decision that transforms intention into real result. After the breathing calms down and the mind becomes clear, comes the part that separates who feels from who builds. Consciously deciding who you will be on that day. It's not about what will happen. It's about how will you position yourself. Regardless of what happens, it may seem like a small detail, but this silent decision shapes choices, words, and attitudes throughout the day. And that's where prosperity begins to take shape. Here's how it works. Before getting out of bed, you choose a practical identity. Something simple like, today I act with focus. Today I make decisions with courage. Today I act like someone who is prosperous. It's not a magic mantra, it's alignment. When you define this early, the brain starts looking for behaviors consistent with that choice. It's like putting on your inner self before your outer self. A practical example helps. Imagine you decided to act with discipline. Throughout the day, when laziness strikes, your brain remembers the decision made earlier. When a distraction arises, you notice it faster. Not because you've become a superhuman, but because the mind hates inconsistency. She tries to keep you aligned with who you've decided to be, and that changes everything without dramatic effort. But that decision alone is not enough. There is a next step that makes this identity cease to be merely mental and start generating visible results. Something that connects emotion, image, and action in a way that almost no one teaches. When the mind believes, the body obeys, and the day follows suit. Now comes a subtle but decisive turning point. The mind doesn't change through logic, it changes through image. You can decide to be disciplined, prosperous, focused, but if that decision doesn't take shape in your mind, it evaporates throughout the day. This is where many people get lost. They even start well, but they can't sustain it. Something is missing to fix the decision in the subconscious. What really works is creating simple scene short, almost mental flash. Nothing like a long movie. Something quick. You seeing yourself acting calmly, closing a good deal, resolving something important with clarity, fulfilling what you promised yourself. When you do this right after waking up, the brain understands. This is already underway, and then he starts acting as if it were true. Imagine a child rehearsing a presentation before school. They imagine, repeat, feel. When the time comes, their body already knows what to do. It works the same way with you. The difference is that now the stage is your real life. Prosperity doesn't begin with money. It begins with this daily internal rehearsal. Those who skip this step try but end up exhausted, forcing results. And there's a curious detail. When you create this internal image, your actions change without conscious effort. You speak differently, react differently, choose differently. It almost seems like luck, but it's internal coherence. However, there's still one essential element missing for this not to become just a good start that dies halfway through the day. The right emotion, the fuel that most ignore. Here's a point that almost nobody really understands. Thought without emotion is just mental noise. You can imagine, decide, plan. But if there's no feeling involved, nothing holds up. It's like trying to drive a car without fuel. And it doesn't have to be exaggerated theatrical emotion. It just has to be real, a genuine feeling of gratitude, trust, or expectation can change the game. It works like this. When you wake up and create that mental image of what you want to experience in 2026, you add a simple question. How would I feel if this were already happening? Perhaps it's relief. Perhaps it's security. Perhaps it's quiet pride. Hold on to that feeling for a few seconds. That's all. That's the signal the subconscious understands as truth in the making. A very practical example. Many people want prosperity, but associate money with tension, fear, or guilt. When the image comes without positive emotion, the brain freezes. Now, when you associate prosperity with peace, freedom, and lightness, the body relaxes and cooperates. The mind doesn't resist what seems safe. It resists what seems like a threat, even if it's success. And it's precisely at this point that something interesting happens. When the right emotion kicks in, the day begins to respond differently. Small opportunities appear, ideas emerge, attitudes change. Not by magic, but because you've started operating in a different internal state. But there's still a simple, almost banal step that transforms all of this into something lasting throughout the entire day. The simple gesture that seals everything and sustains the entire day. After the image and the emotion, a small but crucial detail emerges to give concrete form to what you have just aligned internally. This is where many people break the process without realizing it. They think, they feel, and they jump up. When they do that, the world swallows up their intention in a few hours. What sustains the inner state is a simple, almost symbolic, but extremely powerful gesture. This gesture is to write. Don't write pages and pages. Nothing dramatic. Just jot down 1 or 2 sentences that summarize who you decided to be that day and what you're building for 2026. When you write, your brain understands that it has moved from the realm of ideas to the realm of commitment. It's like signing an agreement with yourself first thing in the morning. A practical example. Write something like, "Today I act with focus and responsibility," or "Today I take consistent steps towards my prosperity." This takes less than a minute but creates a curious effect. Throughout the day, you remember what you wrote, not as a heavy demand, but as a silent guide. And then the inevitable question arises, okay, and after the day really begins, how do you maintain that without getting lost in the chaos? How to navigate the chaos of the day without losing what you built in the morning? Here's the part that almost no one teaches. The day is not going to cooperate with you. Unexpected things always happen. Difficult people, delays, demands, exhaustion. And no, that doesn't mean the ritual has failed. It means it's begun to be tested. The difference is that now you don't enter the chaos without a reference point. You enter with one internal return point. It works like this. Throughout the day, when something goes off track, you don't try to go back to the whole ritual. You just go back to a keyword. That's what you defined in the morning. It could be focus, calm, discipline, prosperity. This word acts like a mental button. In seconds, you reorganize yourself internally. Without drama, without internal struggle, without guilt. A real-life example. You find yourself irritated in the middle of the afternoon. Instead of reacting automatically, you take a breath and remember, today I act with clarity. That's it. That micro pause changes the tone of the conversation, the decision you make, the next step. It seems small, but that's exactly how good days turn into good weeks, and good weeks turn into a different year. And here's something important. This process isn't about perfection. It's about quick recovery. You'll lose your composure sometimes. Everyone does. The question is how long it takes to get back on track. And there's a final, simple, and rarely discussed habit that closes this daily cycle and prepares the ground for the next day effortlessly. The nightly closing that prepares for the prosperity of the following day. Here's the point that makes this process cumulative. The day doesn't end when you lie down, it ends when you review it. Many people wake up trying to do everything right, but go to sleep without completing the cycle. And this causes the mind to carry invisible, unfinished business into the next day. Prosperity is also about mental clarity, not just action. The closing is simple. Before going to sleep, you mentally review the day and identify one thing that did well. It doesn't have to be something grand. It could be staying calm, completing a task, or saying no when needed. This recognition signals to the brain. The method works. And what the brain perceives as functional, it tends to repeat. After that, you do something even more strategic. Anticipates the following day with a light intention. No long list needed. Just one direction. Something like, tomorrow I will act with more clarity. Or, tomorrow I will take a concrete step towards my prosperity. This simple command works while you sleep, preparing the inner ground even before you wake up. And when you combine mindful mornings, plus quick restarts during the day, plus nighttime closure, something curious happens. You don't feel like you're forcing change. Change becomes identity. But when you look at all of this together, an inevitable question arises, and it completely changes how you're going to start your next few days. Why so few people maintain this, and how you avoid falling into the same cycle. Now comes an uncomfortable, yet liberating truth. Most people don't fail due to lack of knowledge. They fail due to lack of consistency. They start out enthusiastic, do it for 2 or 3 days, feel something change, and then relax. Not because they are weak, but because they underestimate the power of accumulation. Prosperity rarely arises from a grand gesture. It arises from small, repeated alignments without negotiation. The most common mistake is expecting motivation. But motivation is unstable, volatile, and somewhat lazy. What sustains this process is rhythm. It's not about being enthusiastic. When you treat this ritual as something optional, it becomes disposable. When you treat it as part of your identity, it becomes automatic, like brushing your teeth. You don't decide whether to do it, you simply do it. A simple example. Nobody wakes up asking, "Should I brush my teeth today?" You brush because it's part of who you are. The same logic applies here. When this morning routine becomes part of your identity, you don't need to convince yourself. Your body gets up, your mind cooperates, and the day flows with less friction. Not perfect, but more coherent. And it's precisely at this point that everything connects. When you understand that you're not trying to change your entire life, but only deciding who you are every day when you wake up, something changes from the inside out. And this opens the door for an even deeper shift, one that begins with a simple yet powerful question right at the start of the video. The question that will define whether 2026 will be just another year or a turning point. There comes a point when everything boils down to a simple, almost uncomfortable question. Are you willing to stop living on autopilot? Because ultimately, This ritual isn't about beautiful mornings or sophisticated techniques. It's about taking responsibility for your own inner state before the world tries to decide for you. Those who avoid this question remain busy, but not necessarily evolving. The truth is that 2026 won't change because the calendar turned. It changes when you change the way to position oneself in the face of ordinary days. It's not the big event that transforms a life, it's the repeated decision on seemingly identical mornings. And that requires honesty. Some days you'll do it willingly, others out of pure commitment. And that's okay. Consistency isn't eternal enthusiasm. It's fidelity to the process. Think of it like an invisible bank account. Each conscious morning is a small deposit. On its own, it seems irrelevant. But accumulated over months, it becomes something hard to ignore. Prosperity works like that. Silent at the beginning, obvious at the end. Those who give up early never see the full effect, and therefore think it doesn't work. And it is precisely here that you need to decide something intimate, something that is only yours. Not for today, nor for tomorrow, for the entire coming year. Because there is a next step that doesn't depend on any technique, only on an internal commitment that, once made, completely changes the way you begin each day. The invisible divide that separates those who understand from those who live it. Here's the final point of the construction, and it's simpler than it seems. No one will oversee this ritual for you. There's no applause, no external pressure, no immediate recognition. It's a silent agreement between you and yourself. And that's exactly why it works. True prosperity is born when you do what needs to be done, even when no one is watching. The commitment isn't to the result, it's to the process. Some days will be clear, others confusing. Some days you'll wake up inspired, others tired. The mistake is thinking that the ritual depends on your emotional state. In fact, it exists precisely to organize that state. When you do it even without wanting to, you teach your mind something powerful. I don't negotiate with what builds me up. Over time, this commitment creates a curious change. You begin to respect yourself more. You trust yourself more. And this quiet self-confidence begins to reflect in your financial, professional, and personal decisions. Prosperity doesn't arrive as a gift from heaven. It appears as a natural consequence of someone who has learned to manage themselves. And when that internal agreement is in place, everything that comes after, goals, money, opportunities, growth, ceases to seem distant. Because now there's a foundation. And it's precisely from this foundation that it makes sense to open the video in a way that captivates, provokes, and makes the viewer think, maybe I'm starting my days the wrong way. The mistake almost everyone makes when trying to change their own life. Here's an important closing note before we move on. Most people try to change outcomes without changing the starting point. They want a different 2026, but they keep waking up the same way, thinking the same way, and reacting the same way. And then they get confused, wondering why nothing changes. The truth is simple and a little harsh. Life responds to pattern, not intention. When you understand that the day is decided even before it begins, something changes in your attitude. You stop waiting for the right moment and start creating internal conditions every day. It's not rigid control, it's direction. It's not perfection, it's awareness. And that takes a huge weight off your shoulders because you realize you don't need to solve everything. Just start right. This is the kind of knowledge that doesn't usually appear in quick, in-depth content, because it demands personal responsibility. You can't outsource it. You can't romanticize it. Either you take charge of your days, or someone, or something, will take charge for you. And almost always, that someone doesn't have your best interests at heart. And now that the whole process is clear, the most important moment of all arrives. How to present this in a way that makes the viewer recognize themselves in the first few seconds of the video. Because if she doesn't see herself there, nothing that comes after will be absorbed. If you keep waking up the same way, you'll keep reaping the same rewards. Now let me ask you something for real. What exactly needs to happen for you to stop starting your days on autopilot? Another year passing quickly? Another silent frustration? Or the awareness that, if nothing changes at the root, 2026 will just be a repetition disguised as something new? Because knowledge without application doesn't transform. It only entertains. Everything you've seen here doesn't require special talent, money, or extra time. It requires decision. The decision to take control of your inner state before the world does it for you. If you apply this ritual, even on difficult days, even when you're not feeling inspired, something changes. First within, then in your choices, and inevitably, in the results. Now reflect, what would your next 12 months look like if you started each day with intention instead of reaction? What if you stopped trading with what builds you up? What if you treated your mind as an asset, and not as a repository of distractions? That answer doesn't depend on me. It depends on what you're going to do tomorrow when you wake up. If this video made sense to you, comment below. I'm ready for 2026. This isn't for me, it's for you to make this commitment publicly. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep learning how to align mind, attitude, and prosperity in a practical and real way. Because those who start the day right don't have to chase after life later.